B. Oedipus Rex, the height of Greek tragedy.
Let's talk about Oedipus. First off, you may have heard this guy's name pronounced Oedipus, but we pronounce it Oedipus. Why? Because we like it that way. Actually, it's because this pronunciation is more true to the Greek original. Oedipus Rex, a tragedy by the Greek playwright Sophocles, was first performed in the 5th century BC, about 2,000 years before Shakespeare was born. Great. But what does this have to do with Shakespeare? Well, we can use this play as a model, a prototype for what makes a great tragedy.
The story is well known. According to a prophecy, Oedipus is born destined to commit the most horrible of crimes. Is it running with scissors? No! Not refilling the ice cube tray? No again! He's destined to kill his father and marry his mother!
As the play opens, we watch as Oedipus, the king of thieves, deals with a plague that has struck his city. It turns out the city is cursed because the murder of a previous king has gone unsolved. The city will continue to suffer until the murderer is punished. So Oedipus investigates, and in so doing, he finds out some terrible facts about himself.
He realizes the people who raised him in Corinth aren't his real parents. Second, he realizes that in an earlier disagreement, he killed a man who was the king, his biological father. Third, he realizes the woman he married and had children with was his biological mother.
To repeat, Oedipus's own investigation into the murder of the previous king reveals that he is the murderer, and that this man was his father, and the woman he married was that guy's wife, which makes her his mother. How did all this happen?
Well, as a young man, after Oedipus was told by an oracle about the prophecy of his father killing and mother marrying tendencies, he vowed never to return to Corinth to see the people he thought were his parents. The only problem was, those guys weren't his parents. But Oedipus didn't know that. Anyway, he traveled far from his home, and one day he finds himself at a crossroads, arguing with a man about who has right of way. Well, things turn ugly, like most traffic incidents do. The man insults Oedipus, and Oedipus kills him. A little excessive, don't you think?
Well, Oedipus takes off and makes it to Thebes, where the citizens there are oppressed by this monster, the Sphinx.
The Sphinx is this weird creature with the body of a lion, these wings sticking out, and the face of a woman. She's terrorizing Thebes, and until someone answers her riddle, she will wreak havoc on the city.
Well, Oedipus, Mr. Smart Guy, answers the riddle. This frees Thebes from the plague, and the citizens are very happy. So happy, in fact, that they make Oedipus their king. And they let him marry their widowed queen, Jocasta.
All's well that ends well, right? We got this plague, remember? The plague that's hanging around because the murderer of the old king hasn't been punished? Well, the facts of Oedipus's investigation basically tell him this. Oedipus, you know that nice couple who raised you in Corinth? Well, they're not actually your parents. And you know that guy that you killed at the crossroads? Guess what? That was your dad, the king of Thebes. And Jocasta? Joe Mama.
Well, Oedipus is totally devastated when he learns this. He can't believe he's the guy who killed the former king, his father, and is responsible for the plague on Thebes. In his horror, he decides to punish himself by putting out his eyes with 2 long pins taken from Jocasta's robe.
For Oedipus, there is no relief from the agony of his situation. As the last lines of the play tell us, call no man fortunate who is not dead. The dead are free from pain.
This is a tragedy, all right, but why should we care? We've just witnessed the story of a man who, when finding out he killed his father and married his own mother, gouged his eyes out. That's not ennobling. That's just gross, right? Well, there's more to it than that. We're exploring the depth of human suffering and the responses to that suffering. Oedipus's suffering and actions set him apart from us and make him worthy of study. Like with King Lear, we see a character maintaining his dignity in the face of great calamity, and through this process we see the true measure of the man.
Oedipus is responsible for his actions, even though they were prophesied. The prophecy did not cause Oedipus to kill his father and marry his mother. When Oedipus discovers the facts, he confronts them with courage and integrity.
What do we mean by courage and integrity? Well, Oedipus doesn't shrink from the knowledge of the horrible things he's done. He faces them, and by blinding himself, takes responsibility for his actions.
Let's examine Oedipus as a tragic figure by asking some key questions.
Is he a mighty figure, someone who is better than us? Does he suffer a reversal of fortune? Does he endure uncommon suffering? Does he recognize the consequences of his actions? Does his plight ennoble and enlarge us? Let's take them one at a time.
Is he a mighty figure, someone who's better than us? Well, that Rex on the end of Oedipus isn't his nickname or anything. Rex means king, so we know Oedipus is the ruler of Thebes. Does he suffer a reversal of fortune? You bet. When the play opens, Oedipus is the king. By the end, he's banished from the city. That's a real 180-degree turnaround. Does he endure uncommon suffering? I would say that finding out you killed your father and married your mother qualifies as uncommon suffering. Next question. Does he recognize the consequences of his actions? Yes. He realizes he has brought the plague upon the city and punishes himself violently. Does his plight ennoble and enlarge us?
Well, that's the clincher, isn't it? Witnessing this story touches something deep inside us, that part of us that makes us human. Oedipus's experience hits us to the very core. A big reason his experience moves us is that for pure economy and tragedy, Sophocles' Oedipus Rex wins hands down.
What do we mean by economical, you ask? Well, there's nothing extra going on in the play. We do hear of Oedipus's personal history, but we only get it as he unravels the mystery. So the focus of the play is on Oedipus's self-discovery. Everything that happens in the play is crucial to the development of this one theme. You see, because we're along for the ride, we vicariously confront the same things Oedipus confronts, and in doing so, we've grown in our own understanding of what it means to be human to an extent we would not otherwise know. And such an encounter is ultimately transforming.
This intense experience both shatters and inspires us. It's a peculiar but extraordinary experience.
And that is why we can describe tragedy in art as a terrible beauty. We've discovered truths about the depths of the human soul. Now, this tragedy stuff can be difficult to get the hang of at first. That's because we're dealing with the limits of human potential. We see characters and situations we probably wouldn't even be able to deal with. But if we understand the story of Oedipus, we understand tragedy.
Okay, it's time for a little review of what we've learned about Sophocles' Greek play, Oedipus Rex. Due to its economical presentation and overall effect, Oedipus Rex is an excellent example of tragedy. The economical presentation is created because all of the play's events lead to Oedipus's realization of his horrible acts. The overall effect is devastating because we see Oedipus, the tragic figure, face his extreme suffering with courage and integrity. We'll leave ancient Greece now and move into the Middle Ages.
Section C, Tragedy in the Middle Ages.
After studying the tragedies of ancient Greece, we need to stop in the Middle Ages before making our way to Shakespeare and the English Renaissance. Let's look at the important tragic forms of the years between AD 500 and AD 1500, the time known as the Middle Ages.
These tragedies, or tragical tales, were really teaching stories rather than dramatic plays. One of the most influential of these is Boccaccio's De Casibus Rerorum Illustrium, which was written in Latin.
This book gave its name to a type of tragedy called a De Casibus tragedy. A medieval De Casibus tragedy has three main features.
1. These tales are in the form of narratives or stories rather than dramatic plays. 2. The fall or death of the main character, usually from a high position, was enough for the tale to be considered tragic. And 3. These tales were meant to teach the reader various lessons, for instance, humility or caution.
This form of tragedy continued into the 1500s, the most notable example in English being The Mirror for Magistrates, which was an immensely popular series of cautionary tales about the fall of famous English figures.
These narratives are warnings. They're kind of like they're telling us, you better watch it, buddy, I've got my eye on you. It was all about the Wheel of Fortune, a concept which was very popular with the Elizabethans.
The Wheel of Fortune!
You may be sailing along pretty good. Everything's fine. That's when you're at the top of the Wheel of Fortune. But it's just a matter of time before you fall, because that wheel just keeps on turning. Whoa! Then you're down here, at the bottom. And let me tell you, life stinks down here. Hey, Oedipus!
You know, it's a short step from the De Casibus tragedies to plays that Shakespeare wrote, like his history plays about the fall of kings, for instance, Richard II and Richard III. You know, since we've mentioned these two Shakespeare plays, Let's dive in all the way and talk about what his tragedies are like.